Hi, you are listening to Mindset, spelled with AI, a bi-weekly tech podcast that is shaping what you know and think about AI. My name is David. I'm a tech journalist and entrepreneur.
And I'm
And
Filip.
here with me, here with me is Filip, an AI executive.
You were hesitating, so I said I can introduce myself. I am a AI executive. David, good to see you again.
You've been busy.
Yes, I was. I had a privilege of having a little bit of, let's say, a month or 5 weeks of intensive AI conferences all around the Europe. So I collected few points, and I said it would be a great opportunity for us, maybe to summarize also for our audience. What are the topics that the actual AI practitioners are talking about? Because all these conferences were not about, hey, what could possibly happen or like an academic debate. These were real use cases, speakers invited to introduce their already running AI solutions. So maybe I would like to frame this episode into title of like what progress and trends the proven experts already talk about.
Yeah, let's do this. I'll have a question in the end. What do you think out of this is true and what is a hype?
So let me open the discussion with the first point, which is pretty interesting because it's shaping the way that people think about AI, and that is that most of the real practitioners who are building AI solutions and are collecting revenue for that, because you can be hobbyist just doing it for yourself, but the people who really make AI real revenue generating business, they all agree that we don't really need the scaling of the AI that the frontier leaps are trying to push. So there was this ever debate like how often should a new model be released by the companies, and across the board of these people who are implementing AI, there is a uniform perception that we don't need bigger ones. So of course the AI is still in its early stages, and we will get better models later on. But for like moving forward, we don't need to have better models, because for what we need to do, and we're going to talk about in a while, like what are the most common already implemented use cases. So we can come at that point back to this topic. But what the practitioner says that for we are asked to build and for which people are willing to pay for, the existing models are already an overkill. So we don't need big models. So it's an interesting, because tech journalists, and no finger pointing here or blame shaming, but tech journalists are trying to kind of poke the frontier labs when there's going to be next GPT, when there's going to be next Claude. So they try to kind of instill the progress, but the key message here is that the progress should not be measured anymore by the model releases. So we are beyond the point where to make AI significantly more impact, you need a new model to be released.
When there's like new frontier model, I'm waiting for kind of what's going to happen around it. And when there's like the first slight like bug or mishap or something, there's a lot of finger pointing going on. And I'm definitely guilty of that as well as colleagues from the industry. But what when I was listening now to you, my mind just went to a place like, okay, so shouldn't be our collective mindset and goal getting to smaller and smaller models that are as effective as these big ones, with also keeping or decreasing the amount of energy they need to process? Because I've seen some papers recently come out that are going in this direction, but it's still like a niche, I would say, topic or news headline. Doesn't is It's not like like doesn't grab the headlines or and the titles in mainstream press, but at the same time I feel it is kind of important.
Small is indeed a new sexy, and I'm gonna like spill more beans in a while. But what you need to understand that this is not necessarily the same vector of discussion, because a lot of people think that when we're going to get new and new models, they need to be necessarily bigger and bigger, or that's what the frontier labs are at least trying to create the impression or image on. So by rule, the next model needs to beat all the previous benchmarks and has to be better and better. So that's the way that the audience is now primed and is also craving for new models to come. this discussion about big and small can actually mean that you already take the existing one and you distile it into a smaller piece, which is probably just a small niche loss on efficiency of the benchmarks, but significantly better in less energy, less fast for inference, can run on a smaller GPUs, and so on and so on. So ultimately, yes, these two topics seem like related, that when you crave for bigger models, you will not get necessarily smaller models. But it also might not be true, because you can spend resources and training capacity to turn the existing big models into a specialized small models. Craving is not necessarily for new smaller models. A community agrees on. That was, I think, a good way to put it. That when I'm building my chatbot to analyze an emails, it doesn't have to have like a PhD in art history, right? Because like how many my emails are going to be about art history, right? But that's what the frontier labs are pushing. Like they're trying to push a universal models where your model is equally good in sorting emails as it is in like knowing about the art history. So that's what the committee is trying to challenge. We don't need that. Please, let's not bigger and bigger behemoth, which are going to be over encompassing and an expert on everything, because then the fact like how large the context window for you to prime specifically about something, or how large the metrics that you're processing has to be in order to get your email sorted, you're basically being very wasteful.
So basically, you're saying ChatGPT or GPT-5 can do like from coding to everything, but usually, let's say my use case is a lot of work with text, summarizing, going to do research, and that's basically almost like using the small finger of ChatGPT-5, and I still kind of have the rest of that.
I would put
Okay.
in another analogy. So it's like you going shopping to the groceries and you take an 8-wheel track for that. Definitely works, but like it's not very pleasant to park it in front of a supermarket, and it's probably not very easy to like load it properly, and the economy of it and ecology of it is terrible. So that's the way that they think about it.
Okay, that's now I get it. Now I get it. Okay, okay. Let's go next.
One more thing maybe before we move on, because I'm bringing this topic not necessarily just because it was discussed, because there were many other things which were discussed and I don't think it deserve to be here in this discussion with mindset audience. But I'm bringing this here because I also came across one interesting figure. So I had a chance to study the OpenAI investor documents, at least the ones which, at least the part which was kind of public. And in those documents, they do a little bit of a projection of how they want to spend tokens. So, what share they want to spend on still building new things, and what share they want to spend on delivering the inference for the products that they already have. And why I'm bringing this up is that all the AI practitioners say, don't build new models, at least not that fast that you are. We don't need them. We need to start using what we have. And then you look at it, and 50% of the budget of the tokens of OpenAI is assumed, of compute tokens, is assumed to be go for training. And you go like, seriously, guys? Like, this is not what the market wants, especially if you know how skyrocketing the demand for inference is. So, how much people want to use the models, and how many like trillions of tokens are being expected there. And in an equal amount, if is to be put on a training, it's certainly an overkill. So, I think that I would like to generalize it in a way that the frontier labs are now ahead of a demand for development of the models, and they're probably doing for financing reasons or PR reasons or like brand awareness reasons, but not the AI community is not craving for new models.
Just one anecdote. For about 2 years,
Mhm.
I have been using GPT 3.5 for one task. It just did it well. I wasn't complaining. I have set it up so that it does what I need. There were no mistakes, and it worked perfectly fine. I just upgraded it because of there was like a separate app I needed to run it in, but like that tells you, I think, a lot about the state of like using like ChatGPT 5 for the same task. It actually takes longer for ChatGPT 5 for GPT 5, I mean, to do the same task GPT 3.5 did without
Yeah, it would cost
any
probably
problems.
3 times the amount of a tokens that it does. Yeah, I think I would have one more analogy for people to understand where we sit here. Is it's a little bit like you know really well the market of the hardware. Okay, let's take notebooks. So most of the notebooks in the cutting edge specs is completely unnecessary and wouldn't be bought, like the gaming PCs and other thing would be not bought by a regular user, because for your usual work in the office, which is most what the people use for, or like at home, like a mid tier or maybe even like a lower tier computer is good enough for what you need to do. And it's more like investment. Okay, so I take a mid tier for this to be relevant for next 2 3 years, so I don't have to buy another one soon. But you will not buy like a top notch AI computer for your home, because like what's the use case for it? And that's where we are a little bit in the frontier labs, like releasing the new models.
Okay, what else did you learn?
One thing which was really striking me was also the change of a paradigm about thinking about AI. I like you asked me a question at the end, and we're going to summarize what is hype and not. So one thing which is really interesting, that this kind of insight can only come from people who are actually building the AI solutions, because all the vendors and all the frontier labs would like try to sell you a different story. But basically, the practitioners told me stop thinking about AI capabilities. So a lot of people, when AI started, were discussing like how does it meet human benchmarks, what percentage of the human skills it has. So it was the debate was, is it good enough? Yeah, basically, or is it good? Is it worthy the time? Will it be kind of able to be a proper alternative or replacement of the human labor? Now, most of the people I talk to about these 5 conferences is that stop thinking that way. Start thinking in what impact you can have, because most likely AI already can and you're not aware of it. And if it can't, it's accelerating so fast that in 6 to 9 months it's going to be there. And that's exactly the time where your ambition and the technology is going to meet, right? So stop thinking about AI in terms like, can it, do I need to do a research if a model like that exists, or if no, assume it does, and simply start thinking about, okay, what impact I want to bring, how do I want to, who's going to be willing to pay for that, or who's going to be able to benefit from that. And that's the like a shift in a mindset. Conferences end of last year, so a year ago, we're still like, okay, where it will take us, what new models we will get. So this kind of capability scaling. Now the practitioner says, forget the capabilities, just go ahead and build it based on the impact, which opens a new era, because then also the main AI users or main AI involved people a year ago were the technologists who had to assess the capability. Now it's turning into a real business people who can think, okay, I want AI to do this, and sooner or later somebody tell me which model and which setup or which use case or which agent is going to do that. But that's the way to think about it, and that's fascinating, because that means that we are really moving forward in AI perception and AI adoption.
What I'm interested in is the next topic that I see, where you talk about tokens.
Yes. So I'll come to the tokens, but maybe a good segue to that would be also to cover the agents, because we
Mm.
can jump over that point. So because it's a little bit related, it's like build up on as a Lego brick. So let's discuss the agents first. So one thing which is absolutely evident. So when I don't know, Time has, I think, the word of the year. The dictionaries usually have like what was the most emerging word of the year. So I would say that in AI, definitely the word of the year 2025 is agents, because it started like, you can't believe it, but MCP was announced like less than a year ago, right? So,
Really?
yeah, it is. It is how fast we are moving. It is really just kind of where we are sprinting. And ever since the time that the MCP started and the integration of the tool started to be possible, there are different lines how the agents are developing. And you can see that when the mainstream companies like SAP or Deloitte or whatever, like the companies which are trying to drive the real digital transformations and innovations with you or for you, are jumping on the agents heavily as well. Now, this is the hype part, right? But what was really interesting was that in these conferences, there were really people who were already reporting first learnings from implementing agents. So first of all, for most of the companies, the approach now is like make them as proliferate as possible, as like as numerous as you can. So a lot of companies simply create a tool, easy, either like you type a description, which now also OpenAI and NA8 is trying to enter that, or you simply like drag and drop easy things, combine them, and you have an agent. So a lot of companies are now in a stage, the progressive ones, I mean the ones which are going after agents already, let everybody in a company build his or her own agent. To be completely honest with you, I think I'm old enough to see some patterns in this. So we had a similar things with the mobile apps and everything. So I think there will come a time where it needs to converge, because you will find out that it doesn't make sense to have 100 different icons on your telephone's screen for everything, which was the case at the beginning. Like you had even for like a web pages, you had a dedicated icon back then that I'm not sure how many listeners even realize that. Seeing the history, I'm a little bit worried that this is not the way to go. But we are in a stage where most of the companies like give a free hands and create a lot of agents, or then the central team creates few useful agents for everybody. What I found most interesting is the impact of it. So you remember we had a debate on does it going to influence the job market or not? And so I'm gonna test your memory on that. Do you remember what was the most at risk kind of type of a jobs when it comes to seniority?
When it comes to seniority, wasn't it like seniority?
Yeah, like when you look at the
Wasn't
spectrum
it
of
like
jobs,
middle managers or something like that?
yes, it was the junior positions and then the middle managers was the order. And this is being confirmed by the first companies who do this. So far we only had like a meta studies who were trying to understand the impact of the AI on like a macro level. So does the unemployment change? This we had these stories about the college students all of a sudden like having difficulty to find a first job and so on and so on. So the agents implemented in the bigger companies, which really like take a serious progress in that, confirm that most of the use cases that they created agent for were the junior work. So it is confirming that what agents are now useful for is mostly what the junior positions were doing, and therefore it is likely to expect that the demand for them is either going to divert to something else which we don't know, or is going to really kind of frozen to freeze the hiring in those positions. So that's the real impact of it. And to give you also a bit of a figure, so one of the companies which was like disclosing their own progress on this was Prosus. And in Prosus, they have agents, like plenty of them, about 10,000 of them already, which is running in a company, which is exactly the approach, like give everybody a chance to build maybe even duplicit or triplicit agents, but they still have a chance to do them. And but what was more interesting, they said that the work that this agent is doing is equivalent of almost 1,000 FTEs for the cost of the 15 FTEs. So that gives you a bit of a scale of they are now using it still for expanding. So for like you get an extra capacity and you can retain the capacity and then do other things. So they are not replacing the positions by that. But sooner or later, like they will come to the point where they can't just keep on adding and adding. They'll be also cutting, and the ratio is really like strong one, right? So it's almost 1 to 70, right? So that's really a strong proof of the impact of the AI engine implementation can be severe also in companies.
Wow, that's kind of mind blowing. Although it's still first signs,
Yeah,
right?
it's early low hanging fruit, right? So, but I think that this layer of things which people are doing pointlessly and a machine can do so much faster, this layer will be present in almost every company. The question is like how big the buffer or the beef will be to kind of consume this, but definitely there. So it's not like you have a very niche specific, I don't know, legal or heavy coding or whatever entity, and then you have take benefit of that. This was really an agent like summarize newsletters of competitors for me, or like let me read through new regulation and understand where it impacts our, or let me find a bug in that code, right? So it's not necessarily something which is industry or company specific. So it gives an idea that 2020 thing is going to be probably pretty hot on replacing the tasks first and then maybe whole roles by AI. And I also expect, this last comment, I also expect that this is going to be a strong task for the top managements to address in 2026. So I would expect that a lot of shareholders seeing these see this, because I mean there was a 3,000 participants conference, so it was not a small discussion. So a lot of people see this, and top managers and shareholders who have seen this will probably ask their own teams to do something about it. So I expect that 2026 will be a year of where a lot of top management will get an yearly goals to implement some kind of AI agents to either create capacity or replace capacity.
So is it going to be true what the CEO of Shopify, Tobias Lütke, told his teams that if you want to hire someone, first think if AI cannot do the job?
Yeah, I'm thinking this is even the polite way of putting it, because he's not talking about firing anybody. He's only
Mm.
talking that any new hires will be scrutinized. So this is more like a freeze that I was talking about in hiring of positions, because of course a lot of ideas will not make it through the scrutiny of can AI do this or not. But that's the polite way to put it. Then will come another way saying like, okay, if you have not done something which AI cannot do in last 3 months, what is your chances of staying a member of this team, right? So that's something which is going to come sooner or later as well.
You know, you're really describing like AI Hunger Games. Who will be the first of this team? Who will put together an AI agent that will replace the whole team? Will be the one left.
Yeah, it not necessarily need to be the first mover, because there are probably already some people trying and not being succeeding. So you might not be even the first, but definitely the ones which will be able to foresee and will not like take a defensive but maybe like opportunistic use of this is going to be the one more likely to survive. This is also what I suggested. Like I had an invite for one German podcast, Scavenger AI, lately, and they asked me a question. So, what would you recommend people? And I said like try to stay top of your domain, because the mid part of the domain is so easy to be filled by AI soon.
Interesting. So we did record a previous podcast, and in connection with AI agents, you were telling me that there is like so much tokens being burned.
Yes.
Can you
Yes.
expand?
Yes, so that's now a good bridge to the token topic, which you wanted to discuss anyway. So the thing is that the tokens are being over or are exploding in consumption for three reasons. First of all, as we discussed, the bigger models are eating more tokens. So this is your story of ChatGPT 3.5 could do it for me. ChatGPT 5 can do it for me as well, but it's overkill in terms of the tokens. So it thinks longer, it consumes much more other things as well, right? So that's the first thing. The second reason why this is coming is that we are entering a mode where the creation of the code or code like structures is getting so good that it's almost like a second derivative of agents, where agents are building agents, right? And the moment this is going to happen, by definition, this is going to like significantly bloat the consumption, because all of a sudden now the humans are the limit of how many tokens can be burned on building agents. The moment that the agents are going to build the agents, there is no limit. Theoretically, you can let it run 24/7 to create new agents. I mean, not that necessary is the demand for it, but there's no limitation to it, right? So it's only like how much compute is there available for you to make it happen. So that is going to be a second force accelerating, and a third force, of course. still the frontier labs and all the environment and press and the discourse, the public discourse, is pushing for increasing of the implementation of the AI. So these all three forces combined are going to bring like significantly more tokens needed. And what people don't realize is how big of an issue it is. So I just did a back of an envelope math, because some of the frontier labs who were presenting on these conferences, they also shared like what's the usual usage of the tokens per user per day. And if you take this median consumption now, and you would assume that almost everybody will work with AI sooner or later, because it will get equally, because as it's like, I don't know, internet or other technologies that we use. If the whole Europe would be like using just on a average level, we will need 9,300 trillions tokens just in Europe, right? And just to put it in a context, like for country where you live and we both come from, to feed the hunger of the Slovaks for just a token production, we would need another block of a nuclear power plant to make it happen. Yeah.
So one more, not the existing ones.
No, plus one additional block we would need to just generate enough energy for the tokens just for consumption, not development. No businesses like trying to make research or anything, just for the consumption of the retail users of it, right? So we are nowhere there. Like, and this is also maybe the reason why the AI frontier labs are not that much pushing on a third piece. So let's have like going from 800 million to 2 billion users using weekly OpenAI, right? Because they know they cannot serve it. So they are like trying to taper it, trying to kind of take it down to a level that is durable when they buy. And this is also explaining why they are so eager to buy all the new chips and new data centers, because they see that if the consumption is extrapolated to the total population, which is sooner or later going to happen, then it's going to be really a huge thing. So we are literally short on tokens. And it just, I'm going to come back a little bit to one of the points we discussed here in Mindset. If you remember when I wrote AI is going to hit me by 50, one of the things which I suggested is own your own GPU. So get to the point. So it is getting actually there. And one thing which is also interesting, that NVIDIA has spotted this, and their new device, which Jensen delivered to Elon and Sam Altman also personally, is a device which is doing exactly this, is allowing to run a large LLMs on your local without any compromise on the quantization, so not downgrading the model of precisions or whatever, as it is 70 billion parameters on your local device. This is the new line of the devices which NVIDIA is releasing. So I think that more and more people, especially like maybe not the company, so company will not like buy a rack of those and keep them on their own premises servers, or maybe who knows, maybe there will be another renaissance of on-premise era. But definitely like people like you and me, or like who are working from home, and they would appreciate for, I don't know, coding or text processing or video generating, whatever, the local usage, so they can go and use this one. So I think it's getting more and more realistic, and with the push for the tokens and like a shortage of the big data centers, this is very likely to be the case.
Wow, that's how are we? Do we know?
Yes. So the NVIDIA SDX Spark, which is the name of the new line, costs about $4,000, right? So if you think about it, it's still a little bit too much, because the break even for you is not paying for maybe 200 a month for like a premium subscription. From maybe most people would be somewhere in like maybe paying two or three of the $20 ones. So let's say 80, maybe $60 or 50, $60 per person. Now, if you have several of those in households, that's a different discussion. But even with this, the payback would be still in several years. But I assume because NVIDIA announced it, and there's already 6 other companies who said we want to take this chip and repackage it in. There's Dell's, there's MSI, Asus, Acer. So all the major brands are taking this chip and repackaging it in their own devices. So the mass adoption will be there. So that means that it will also take the price down. So it will be not the NVIDIA luxury price. It will probably somewhere below that. So when it comes to 2,500, it's going to be almost a price of a good gaming PC, or let's say a solid gaming PC, and that's already thinkable. That's not necessarily kind of too far. And the break-even point would be probably, I don't know, year and a half, maybe two, right? So then again brings you to the point that it is already affordable.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, when it gets to the point where it's the cost of a new notebook or a new phone, I think that's kind of like reasonable, and you can also justify it for like regular people. If it's like 2 3 times more, I think it's not something that will be like a large adoption for. Even though I could imagine having like a subsidy for this, and then less people will use the cloud for it.
Yeah, I mean, I would put it in a kind of hardware context. There were a lot of people who were working on a video, and back then needed a great monitor
Mm.
at home, or like Mac Studio, whatever was the highest thing you could get. Yeah, so that's in a similar time. That's in a similar kind of a price range, right? Because I think that the top notch Mac devices were somewhere about 3 to 4 thousand euros, to my
Four five
understanding. So
thousand, yeah.
yeah, so we're already there. It's just not a
Mm.
monitor. It's your own local GPU running the models that you need. All right. I'll like to use this as a segue to yet another point, which was mentioned on these conferences quite often. And this is a little bit to my surprise, to be honest. And it's a positive surprise because I like the idea, but I was not expecting that this is going to be as hot of a topic already in the discussions like in Q3 2025. Also nothing which I predicted in our annual discussions or annual targets for this year. So the reality is that there is already forming a strong like a green AI usage movement, and I think it is going to be even more prominent when people start to realize how wasteful the actual AI that we are now using. Now, I'm going to give you an example which shocked me, to be honest, and really made me thinking because I'm in general like pro green, so pro ecology topics. And I remember that there were times where companies were saying like we will not do air transport, we rather take train or whatever. Like a lot of policies, especially into like are we gonna compensate our CO2 emissions and so on. So I think we're in a similar pathway for AI, which surprises me because the discourse about the new models and everything is like overruling these discussions. But just for your orientation and for the benefit of the viewers, if you upload 2 PDFs to ChatGPT, okay, for them, it doesn't have to be like 100 pages PDF. It can be just few pages PDF. It is equivalent of electricity. It's like to process these 2 PDFs and start like and understand what is them is equivalent of the whole household 1 day electricity consumption. 2 PDFs uploaded into a chat GPT. Now, if you think about it, how many people just throw things there and try for the sake of it, right? Like what is going to do? So I want to like test its limits. So I'm going to give it 100 pages, I don't know, US or EU directive, and let's see what it can do out of it. Now imagine that if you did that, 50 households worth of electricity just for that experiment. It's just amazing. And as we are so separated from the consumption, because the consumption happens on the data centers and we don't have to pay for it, we are not aware. But the ecological aspects of it is really, really bad. And it has several implications where it goes, but maybe you have a comment to that because you wanted to discuss the topic of the tokens. So I wonder, how does it feel for you knowing that throwing 2 PDFs is worth of your daily electricity consumption?
it's disappointing because you don't think about it. Also, there's very little press about this. There's been a while. If you think back, maybe a year and a half, there's been a big debate about it, but that kind of evaporated from the media discourse. And now no one is really talking about this because everyone is using it, and if it's useful, you don't really want to think about the repercussions. But this makes me think, based on what you're saying, that this is actually worse than crypto.
It is, and it's worse than like a combustion engine discussion. It's not worse than ships. Ships are still the biggest polluter when it comes to kind of CO2 emissions, but energy-wise, it is really an issue. It got to the point because now, so what is the next question, right? So what shall we do differently to prevent this? Well, first topic we already addressed. So the AI community says don't make the models bigger and bigger, because this is part of the problem. That I am running a trivial task of understanding of a PDF through model, which consumes a hell of a lot of energy just to read through the PDF, because it's reading it from so many angles. It's reading it, as we discussed, from art history angle as well as the coding angle, because the whole model can actually like draw nuanced conclusions about it, but you don't need that, right? When you read a legal PDF, you don't want to have a discussion about how Socrates would have written this. Mostly you don't, probably, right? So that's the way. The second thing, which is what people can do, which was really interesting, because you probably recognize as a tech journalist that Google has been beaten so much for its end of a search. AI is going to kind of take over. Now, there were literally people saying, if you compare the like electricity track record of a Google search versus the AI suggestion, it's like orders of magnitudes cheaper in electricity point of view to do it through the Google search, right? So there are people saying maybe we should draw clear rules what is ethical to use the AI for from ecological point of view, because it's the same thing as we discussed. I mean, you can take a 8-wheel truck to a grocery shopping, but like, how would your neighbor think about you if you were going for shopping for like with an 8-wheel track, and how would the people in supermarket think about you, like seeing you how you unload I don't know, 2 bags worth of the groceries into a large truck and just then right away, right? So I think we're getting to the point where there will be some borderlines, and some discussion said like, hey, this is so wasteful, don't do it. Like, don't take a flight from, I don't know, Bratislava to Brno, because it doesn't make any sense, right? So make it sensible, or from Bratislava to Vienna even, right? So that's the kind of a thinking which was happening there. There is one more thing which was interesting, which was pointed out, and that is the using of the memory and caching. And here I can tell you even my own experience. We were building for common installed one model, which was working with images. So it was kind of trying to do a recommendation based on images. And we tested how often the same thing is being requested from the model. And especially in fashion, where people buy more or less the same things for some time and then they move to another thing, we could literally prove mathematically that if you have a good caching of what previous people wanted, you can save 40%, 40%
Wow.
of all the costs for generating the recommendation. That's, again, a lot of solutions are naive in a way. You have an API and you ask the same question all over again. But this is why I think that talking to the real AI practitioners in these conferences is so useful, because that maybe makes sense if you do like 10 queries a day. But if you have to service 50,000 or a million queries a day, then you realize that significant part of it, of people, ask for the same or similar question. And it got even to the point, which was interesting for me, that some suggested that the next way to deal with it will be not like a RAG or like a memory, but storing the generated tokens. So whatever the AI is going to spit out as a result, storing it into a regular SQL databases or like a traditional databases. And when heard it, I was like, gee, really? But it's slow. And they said, no, it's going to be in RAM, it's going to be in memory. And then I realized, because if you look at it, the 1 gigabyte of a RAM costs about $3. So you can have a terabyte of data stored for like a $3,000 lifetime, right? Now that is very, 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 very cheap. So there are another stream of AI hardware opening. So besides that, you're going to have a lot of GPUs. You're maybe going to have another storage of the RAM where you're going to store the tokens in memory, because storing them to the disk, even like SSD, would be too slow. So a lot of these will come up with an additional database with having stored generated tokens stored, so they can be reused from the cache, and that's an interesting area as well. I didn't think about it before these conferences, to be honest.
Wow, that's super interesting. Actually, it reminds me of like the same queries people put in Google, right, on a daily basis.
Yes, it's very similar in approach. The way to store and like retrieve the things which others people worked on is a bit different, but the principle is very similar. So that's exactly what is going to happen. Now, to move on, I would have another quiz question for you. So you're kind of observing where the things are going, and you can read from what the usual things are being reported. From your understanding and from your information ingestion, what do you believe are the already most prominent use cases of using LLMs in like real business?
In the real business, I would say things like business analytics, planning, reporting, um, and I'm missing one. But like the administrative stuff, almost like.
Cool. Pretty good guess. So I wanted to also bring the audience a short summary of what are the use cases that you definitely should be already working on, because many other companies has proven that they bring effect. So because this is what the conference is about, were about. So they were bringing a real case studies of this is what we did, this is how it worked, this is how it didn't work.
Nice.
And there are like 4 areas which are very, very popular. The first one is the asking questions or doing research on your own documents. So large troves of your contract, your historical terms and conditions for different version of your products, or for your legal regulations, whatever. So basically having let's put it, a lot of PDFs or
Mm.
like a documents which you have to go through, and like finding some summary or some specific detail out of it. That's the most prominent use case that a lot of companies are doing, because also the LLMs are so good at it, if you can keep the context reasonable. And then we come back to the ecology part, because if you have to load every time a new 100 PDFs to ask the question, then it is not very efficient. But if it can be the same thing, then it can be efficient. Second thing is exactly spot on what you mentioned. So headless BI intelligence. So business intelligence, where bypassing the SQL, so you don't write a code to ask the database anymore. You write a plain English or Slovak or whatever language you use.
Mm.
So talking to your database in plain language is the second most prominent use case now being developed. And it's interesting because that is going to make a lot of data analysts' job worthless as well, or let's say not that useful as they were before. The third use cases is the lead generating. So looking for on an external market for people who I should talk to or who should know about my product and my solutions. Now, for this one, I'm a little bit like mixed feelings, because that is going to alternately create a lot of spam, a lot of unwanted and undesired and unnecessary, maybe even communication. So this is the least popular for me from the top 4. And then the fourth one is, of course, the coding. So companies are really building stacks of AI agents creating the code. Even I had a discussion like a end to end completely. So the AI even writes the first description, then the second AI checks it, develops a proposal, third AI code it, then there's a AI which tests it, and so on and so on. So all the steps are coming, and basically the role of a developer is changing from I need to propose, design, and code into I need to define testing environment. So, what should the solution pass as a kind of a test for this to be working? So, this is still in a human hands, but everything else is already in AI hands.
So, like a person, you will be starting from the endpoint, right?
Exactly. So, you as a developer will only write the tests you need to pass, and everything else will happen by AI itself.
Okay, we're kind of deep with our time, so we have two last trends that you outlined.
Yep. So one of it was the small thing. So we already discussed this from different angles. So I just gonna shortly comment on that one. That most of the universal LLMs are too big, and now comes the smaller part. And this is also maybe a chance for like a new way of redefining. Not many people realize, but now the big models are there. You need to distill them. So the open source can be so much better in it because you can distill much easier open source model than a proprietary model because many teams can work on like distilling from the same source models, whereas in proprietary model only the original company can work on it. So this is why paradoxically new players can become important. So that's the open, yeah, DeepSeek moment when they were kind of taking Llama and tweaking it into something else. I think it's a secret that they work on a Llama to make it happen. And also Microsoft, like they are trying to build their own smaller models dedicated to specific things. So I think that's a chance to redefine anything. So the universal is tired. The new sexy is the small.
Let's go.
That's the thing. And then the last thing which I want to like mention is the OpenAI, and I left it intentionally last because I didn't want to make a rift about it. But I was surprised how many AI real solution building people are already getting pissed with OpenAI. And I thought like, I mean, I know a few of those in my circles, so it was not like complete shock to me. But the shock to me was how prominent it is and how many people are already kind of they were laughing and they are now getting like into a bit of a pushback aggressive mode like hey this is not what we promised like we don't want to generate erotic images and we want to like use AI for science and like something really useful not to get another slob generating machines or like trying to grab attention from social media to your new AI, maybe even AI social media, as the Sora app was. So there's a lot of pushback. So I was wondering, I would like to close with a small discussion on this from your side. So how do you see that? So if you are now to assess the OpenAI's recent development, would you be kind of joining the resistance, or are you still on the side of that the AI is doing amazing things and we should let them just do whatever branch of new ideas that they have.
Um, so there are two basically answers here. I'll tell you that the thing that you said that there's already like a pushback being built, like an opposition against OpenAI, and that they're like have their fingers in a lot of pies. You haven't mentioned the influence on economy through all the deals and cross dealings that might end up might end up in a bubble. And even despite all of this, this is not a big thing. So the one thing was there's not a lot of opposition that I'm seeing, and the second answer was, as I told you in a different podcast that we did together, a Slovak one. I got the feeling after seeing all the Sora deepfake videos that this is not very responsible use of AI, even though it's like very innovative and
Mhm.
very progressive and very on a high level, like video generation. But in terms of like the impact on the public, on us as people, I'm more fearful for this
Mhm.
development than ever, to be honest.
Yep. So just to put it on a kind of a right closing. So the recent setup is that people are still willing to give it a try, still kind of use the models, but they are already building this bitter feeling that may there be a viable alternative, which surely there will be sooner or later. They would probably prefer to choose a player which is also more responsible and sensible, not just greedy about the business in a kind of a uncorrected innovation for the sake of innovation. So that's where it stands. All right. Well, these were the trends that the AI conferences has offered. I hope you enjoy it. I found it pretty fascinating, and also bringing us some of a hope for like a last year discussion of what the trends of 2026 will be. So this was kind of a precursor for that. Let's see which of these topics will make it into the 2026 predictions. I was super cool. Like have your more distance point of view because obviously I was immersed into the AI discussions, but having your second opinion was very helpful. So thanks for discussing this with me.
Thank you, Philip. I'll just say that I'm kind of glad that these kind of conferences on this level are happening still in Europe, despite Europe kind of, not being on the forefront when it comes to AI development. So at least we have good conferences, right?
We do.
And that's all for this episode. Find Mindset in your favorite podcast app on YouTube. And don't forget to follow us both on LinkedIn as well as the podcast. And you can also find more information and vote for future topics on mindsetpodcast.com. That's mindsetpodcast.com spelled with AI. Thank you and bye, Philip. Till next time.
Bye bye.